One of my absolute favorite things about Sea of Thieves is that you could log on to the game expecting to do something bland and boring, your usual routine, and end up on one of the most epic adventures of your lifetime. And something very similar to that happened to me today. With Sea of Thieves coming into Season 11, the waters were crowded with people itching for new content. As for me, I was just trying to experiment with some changes in the season, see which activities are still worth doing. But of course, on the high seas, plans might change very quickly. So without further ado, people of the world and beyond, my name is Borg++, and welcome aboard the Boar's Bounty. When I logged on to Sea of Thieves late into a Wednesday in the middle of January, I had one goal in mind: commodities. You see, I had already checked out most of the new features in Season 11, the diving, new loot, raid voyages, but one thing still lingered on my mind. If all these new features were so incredible, are commodity runs even worth it anymore? I wanted to find out for myself. I ran straight to my ship to check the map for any Reapers that may try and ruin my plans, but from a quick glance, the seas looked surprisingly empty. There's normally a Reaper chest on the map, signaling that there are 3 players on the server, but not even that. I raised the flag of the Merchant Alliance and planned my route, traveling from outpost to outpost, starting at Galleons and ending at Morrow's Peak. Assuming I didn't run into any trouble, it shouldn't take that long. But boy, how naive I was. As I was planning my route, I noticed something I had missed before. A Reaper emissary was at the Fort of the Damned. Even worse, it was grade 5. Now for those who don't know, by raising the flag of the Reapers, you condemn your ship to be visible on every player's map in the server. However, once the Reaper hits grade 5, they're able to see every emissary on the map, meaning they would be able to track my every move. By looking out on the horizon, I noticed the unmistakable skull that marked the Fort of the Damned was currently active. Knowing that skull would attract all the bloodthirsty pirates on the seas like flies to a light, I felt a bit safer going about my business. Collected supplies from the outpost and bought all the commodities the merchant owned, and I was finally ready to set sail. My first destination, Daggertooth Outpost. But while I was sorting through my commodities, I had a sudden realization. The more loot we can, the more we need to... I can't speak. Now that I think about it, we should have raised our emissary flags standing before we picked up all these commodities, since commodities do not increase your emissary value. To raise my emissary standing, I decided to do a lost shipment voyage. These voyages would send you out following a trade route, searching for clues that will eventually lead you to a sunken merchant ship with an absolute ton of loot. Marauders Arch Daggertooth. That's not so bad. As I was pondering how many times those Reapers had stacked the FOTD, I noticed another player from the guild I was in joined my crew, and this person would be a lot of help going forward in my journey. I caught him up on my plan and also told him to watch out for the grade 5 Reaper. The first clue led me to the Sunken Grove, though the circle on the map was not exactly very helpful in locating the next clue. Somewhere on the circle's not being very accurate. Luckily, my friend appeared to be an expert map reader, a skill that I had yet to master. After a bit more hunting, we were finally able to head to our final destination, the shipwreck. I had entrusted my friend to the helm of my ship while I was cooking the meat I had purchased from the shipwright. I was aware that we had arrived at our destination, but was not ready for the skeletons shooting holes in my ship. Balancing not trying to overcook the food while also fixing the hole was more stressful than you would have thought, and eventually I just had enough and cannoned over to deal with them personally, leaving my ship and the voyage in the care of my crewmate. Using the skeleton's own cannon, I shot myself back to the ship to aid in collecting the goods. Despite being underwater, looting the ship isn't exactly hard. If you have enough good food on you, you're able to replenish your health and not have to head up for air every 30 seconds. Eventually, though, I would get cocky, spending too much time underwater with too little food, and find myself on the Ferry of the Damned. We completed the voyage, and I commanded my crewmate to sail to Daggertooth to pick up more supplies while I continued cooking. We seemed to have gotten a stroke of luck, as the Reaper was no longer anywhere to be found, likely either logging off or being sunk. However, our luck would turn around when suddenly the seas weren't as quiet as they were. Suddenly, we were seeing ships left and right. When I came up, I immediately noticed a galleon parked at a nearby island, and then I realized they were parked at our next destination. A galleon is a four-man crew, meaning they would have twice the manpower as us. To understand my major concern, just the day before, I had been beaten up by a sloop of noobs. Yeah, I'm washed up. If I could barely handle myself against two noobs, how could I handle myself against four possible experts? My crewmate, however, seemed to think he could handle himself perfectly fine against them, telling me to circle around the island while he went over to talk to them. Knowing he was almost certainly better at PvP than I chose to go along with it. But then I started to notice other crews stalking about. First a galleon at Daggertooth, then another galleon to the south, then a sloop to the west. I knew the chances of them targeting us specifically weren't that high, but it was still enough to put me on edge. So a stroke of luck pierced us again, as the galleon at Daggertooth had just set sail. But something didn't add up. A mermaid was in the water. Someone else was still on the island. But where? My question would be answered in minutes. Despite seeing the player on the beach, I was still checking ladders to make sure it wasn't a trap. We let him merm back to their ship, telling him to notify their crew that we meant no harm. With the strange encounter out of the way, we picked up our commodities and continued west towards Sanctuary the Outpost, the sloop nowhere in sight, and although none of the galleons we saw seemed to take an interest in us, I couldn't help but get flashbacks to that famous clip.
Captain!
Yeah?
I was given a sigh of relief when I noticed the galleons fighting over the Fleet of Fortune. As long as we didn't bother them, they shouldn't bother us. We arrived at Sanctuary Outpost perfectly fine, but my friend announced that they were logging off. I said farewell, and my friend was claimed by Davy Jones. Rest in peace, my friend. It was now up to me to finish the voyage. I collected all the loot from Sanctuary Outpost and sailed towards Port Merrick, when I noticed suddenly a mast sticking out from the other end of the city. A sloop was parked at the island. I decided to conduct a plan. I didn't want to fight him unless absolutely necessary. Being a merchant means you take every precaution necessary to protect your loot and make as big of a profit as possible. If I could, by any chance, convince this guy into an alliance, or at the very least not to attack me, I could very well make much more money than otherwise. My plan was simple. I would turn my ship so the starboard side was facing Port Merrick, leaving breathing room so that if the worst happens, I can immediately make a quick getaway. My plan was to cannon over and attempt to negotiate with whoever was on board. However, the wrath of Rare struck me in the form of a megalodon, forcing me to get closer to the island. I decided I might as well still complete my plan while the megalodon was circling my ship, unable to attack me due to the island's shallow waters. However, as I was preparing my ship, I noticed a mermaid in the water. Wait a minute, a mermaid? Suddenly I heard swimming in the water. Someone was boarding my ship. I ran straight towards the starboard ladder, my flintlock out, ready for anything. And then I found out my suspicions were correct. There they were, the player that belonged to that ship. I threatened him with my flintlock and successfully landed a shot before he was able to board. What followed was a mighty sword duel that seemed to last for an eternity. However, they got the best of me and sent me to the Ferry of the Damned. I was petrified. A massive amount of loot, over an hour's worth of commodities, and lost shipments were on my ship, ready for the taking. And that player now had full control of the boar's bounty. But I was not ready to give up yet. Now, I don't normally let footage speak for itself, but for this, I'll make an exception. Going back the way we came, going back the way we came. Going back the way we came, so. In the worst act of cowardice possible, I turned my ship straight around and sailed right back to Sanctuary Outpost, abandoning the rest of my trade route and selling all my loot. But while I was selling my loot, I couldn't help but feel ashamed for what I had done. Another pirate openly attacked me, and what did I do? I got them off my ship and ran in the other direction. I finished selling my loot, shut off some fireworks, and left my resources in a storage crate for whoever is lucky enough to spawn on this outpost to find. And while I was logging off, I swore to myself that tomorrow, or whenever the next time I would log onto the game, I would redeem myself. This video took me ages to make, and the story is not yet done. The next part will come around sometime soon, so be looking out for that. Until then, thank you all very much for watching, have yourselves a fantastic rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever time it is for you, and I'll see you guys later.